Hi, everybody. This is Heather Lockie with Lasting Conversations. We are really blowing the roof off today with Dr. Temple Grandin, PhD. Dr. Grandin is a pioneer and icon, a world-renowned expert in the fields of animal welfare and autism. And Dr. Grandin herself is an autistic person, and she is here to be a tireless voice of hope. And she's offering resources and ideas to help bridge the gap of education and what is possible for those who are on the spectrum. Dr. Grandin has had multiple books written. She is the author of Autism in Education, Visual Thinking, Navigating Autism, The Outdoor Scientist, and many, many, many more. There is an Emmy Award-winning HBO movie called Temple Grandin that was starring Claire Danes a number of years ago, which is talked about today during our interview. And Dr. Grandin is the professor of graduate studies in animal welfare out at the Colorado State University. So please enjoy this particular podcast. It is very, very special. Dr. Temple Grandin, thank you so much for being here. I am honored to have your presence with us. Thank you.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Good to be here. So we here at Lasting Conversations, we love getting to the heart of everything. And I know you love to get to the nuts and bolts of everything.
Exactly.
And when we met at a ribbon cutting ceremony in Wellington just a few weeks ago, Wellington, Florida, you were there to assist, and you spoke so passionately for the neurodivergent community, the autistic community, for the educators, for the parents, and for the children and adults who are on the spectrum. And so welcome. And I'm going to give you the mic. And basically, what I would love to do is hear more. I got to hear you speak recently, but for those of us who are so aware of what's happening in our world right now with the, I don't want to say influx, but there's a growing population and a growing awareness of the neurodivergent people in our society, and how is it that we can best serve them?
Well, I think we need to start with age groups. And one of the questions that come up is, as autism increased? They have changed the diagnostic criteria over the years. In the 80s, you had to have speech delay to be labeled autistic, which that definitely would have been me. I had no speech delay age 4, along with the autistic symptoms. And then in the early 90s, they put the Asperger's in there, which is basically socially awkward, no speech delay. Then in 2013, they merged it all together. Now, I think, so that there would increase the diagnosis. And you now have a very, very, very big spectrum going from Einstein, who would land in an autism class today because he had no speech delay age 3, to somebody who can't dress themselves. But some of the non-speaking individuals can learn to type independently. And that is something they need to be taught. And it's really important that they have a device to type on where the print appears next to the keyboard, because on a laptop, they cannot make the attention shift. They have to look up. They have difficulty doing that. I think another thing that's contributed to some of the increase is, in my generation, social skills were taught in a much more structured way. You were taught to shake hands, because I have granddads that come up to me all the time, and they discover they were autistic when the kids get diagnosed. Just about every single conference, one of those will come up. I remember going to a conference in Houston, and I had granddad, retired NASA space scientists, come up to me, and they said that half the people in the mission control are probably on the spectrum.
You know, that was something when we met at the reception after the ribbon cutting, that you kind of leaned in and mentioned about the adults, the undiagnosed adults. Yeah. And when actually were you formally diagnosed? And this would have been way back. You were born in 1947. And so you truly are a pioneer in all of this field.
Well, I was taken originally to a neurologist at age 2.5. Had all the full-blown symptoms of autism. They checked me for deafness, and they checked me for epilepsy, and I was negative on epilepsy, which was good. And they labeled me brain damaged. The neurologist didn't know what autism was. You know, it hadn't gotten through the whole medical establishment. And then a few years later, that's when the autism diagnosis came in. but this was 1949 when I would have been taken into the hospital. I got excellent early education, excellent, as good as anything they had today. 2 teachers in the basement of their house. And the things that were emphasized in my little kids program was speech, and they would hold up a cup like this and say cup, and then say cup, and alternate between saying it and speaking slowly. Always encouraged me to use my language, because when the grown-ups talked fast, it went to gibberish. The other thing you need to do is give the kid time to respond. Sort of like having a phone with only one bar of service. It takes time for it to download a web page. Another big emphasis in my program was how to wait and take turns at all kinds of little games. That's really important because it teaches the child to inhibit a response. And then skills, using utensils, brushing my hair, skills. There was absolutely no emphasis on eye contact. I think there's way too much emphasis on that in little kids, and all it does is overload the brain and make it difficult to hear. That'll come later. And I'm very good teaching. I can't emphasize enough the importance of a really good early program, and I had it.
Well, that's wonderful. And actually, I'm glad that you mentioned about the eye contact, because what I had sort of jumped to in my head and in my own blurting out was we were taught the shaking of the hands and perhaps more manners and some physical contact, including the eye contact. So I think one of my questions, I'm glad that you mentioned eye contact, is a little bit tricky for someone on the spectrum. But these days, when there are so many screens, and perhaps there is less physical socialization and some of the basic skills in being out in nature and having that slowing down that you're describing, are you finding that kiddos these days and the parents parenting and the educators, this is where some of the disconnect is for the students, for the kids, because they still need that level that maybe you grew up with, I grew up with, where you were outside and you sat at a dinner table and the things were slower in a bit.
And we had, sit down dinners.
Yep.
Each child was encouraged to tell about their day, and spent lots of time playing outside, lots and lots of time doing that. And TV had just come into our neighborhood. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze.
Mm-hmm.
And
bless you.
I was limited to 1 hour of TV during the week and 2 hours a day on the weekends. And I think I'm not suggesting banning screens, but we need to be limiting it. 6-7 hours a day of screens and watching videos and video games. No. Got to get them doing other things. Now, I don't believe in banning it, but it needs to be limited.
Well, and I think that can go for everybody, that we just all need time to be engaged socially, one-on-one and out in nature.
This is why I did my kids' books, like Calling All Minds.
Yes.
Outdoor Scientist, to get kids doing stuff, because I would spend hours tinkering with little parachutes and bird kites. And I'd tinker and I'd tinker and tinker, trying to figure out how to get them to work. Kids aren't doing those sort of things today.
Well, and this is
tinkering.
Yes, and this is a great segue into what you were saying during the school opening, is tapping into what each student's gifts are, in terms of if they are good with their hands, or what kind of thinking, if they're visual, are they mechanical, and then finding the books that you were talking about is what makes it fun and what will let them thrive and find jobs and careers and take off.
Well, that's what I talk about in my book, Visual Thinking.
Visual Thinking. Mm-hmm.
Visual Thinking, hidden gifts of people who think in pictures, patterns, and abstractions. Now, this may not show up in 3-year-olds. My ability in art showed up more 5, 6, 7 years old, and my mother always encouraged my ability in art. And I would just draw the same horse head over and over again, and she'd get me drawing other things. Another kid, it may be music. I was exposed to musical instruments. I couldn't figure out how to play them. Another kid's going to take off with that. Mathematics later on, algebra, I couldn't do algebra. But another kid's going to take off with algebra, because autistics can kind of come in different types. You can get object visualizer. We're going to be really good at art, building things and mechanical things, photography, and animals. Then you get your mathematics kid. They think in patterns. Music and math go together. They also like to build things. So an algebra book is incomprehensible to me, but to another little kid, it's going to be a door, because you've got to expose kids to things. And if you take a kid that's a mathematics kid and just show him baby math, he's just going to get bored. You've got to challenge him. And then another type of autistic is the one that likes all the facts. They're the history lovers. Love all the facts. Facts about famous movie stars or things like this. They'll get a subject like that. And the kinds of things they can be good at in jobs is what I call specialized retail. There's been some very good successes with selling new cars, auto parts, and they memorized every part number in the warehouse, selling specialized business insurance. These were all jobs where the people appreciated their specialized knowledge to help them find the correct product for them, not just shove the most expensive thing down their throat. Find the correct phone, the correct baseball glove, the right thing for that customer.
Well, that's wonderful. And one of the things that I know that we have folks that are keen on reintroducing vocation and the vocational programs, because in many ways they've been taken out of our educational system. So are you finding that there are companies and industries eager to seek out folks on the spectrum because they actually need people in their companies to do the very jobs that you're talking about?
Well, and some states are putting the shop classes back in. Texas has been doing a lot of that. The upper Midwest, where there's a lot of manufacturing, and putting them back in. Taking out the hands-on classes is one of the worst things that ever happened. We have a gigantic need for the real high-end skilled trades. And in my work with livestock equipment, I worked with many talented people that built machinery and other things for me. And I know people that owned big shops, lots of patents, and they were definitely undiagnosed autistic. And a lot of the people I worked with have retired out, not getting replaced. They are not getting replaced. This is serious. And you probably heard about all the mess with Boeing right now. And that door panel fell off because they didn't put the bolts in right. Well, I'd rather have someone with autism assembling some of that stuff. And then some of the airlines found loose rudder bolts. Well, that's the thing you steer a plane with. I don't like reading loose rudder bolts and private equity. Private equity owned the factory. No, I want somebody who's going to install those bolts correctly. So those very important parts of the plane are going to work. And you're not going to have something like that door coming off.
Are you finding that some of these companies are ready to hear you, hear that message?
Well, what happened in my industry, I know the most about the meat industry. 20 years ago, one of the mistakes that got made was shutting down all the in-house engineering. And I discussed that in my visual thinking book. Now, 20 years right now, now they realize that maybe shutting those things down was a gigantic mistake, because the people that are around in the shops, they're retired out. How are you going to fix things? How are you going to build new things? There's some things we don't make in the United States, like the state-of-the-art electronic chip making machine. And it goes back to taking out shop classes, and that machine's being made in Holland, a very high-wage country. See, I think what's happened is some of the mathematics people and more verbal people that run education, some of them don't realize that visual thinking exists. I did a book talk for visual thinking at a school, and the principal did not know what visual thinking was. But you see, visual thinking is a different type of problem solving. You just see how to fix something. You just see it. Where a mathematician sees patterns and calculates how to do something. There are two different types of thinking. But some autistic kids are going to be the visual thinker, and there'll be others that are the mathematicians. And we need to be building up on the thing that they're good at.
Exactly. And when you were there at the school, you had said, taking the tour, and these are for young ones, you said, there's a 5-year-old here that needs a high school book, a high school math book. So that goes right back to being keenly aware what individually somebody might need instead of cookie cutter.
No, this is the problem, you see. And then you get kids of different skill levels. I mean, that, as I said, an algebra book's a doorstop for me, but that same algebra book given to the mathematics autistic kids a door to opportunity.
Well, which is amazing that, and you're bringing up algebra because this is one of these mandatory things. You can't get into college, or you can't even graduate high school without algebra. Well, so here you are, the algebra book can be a book stop, and yet you are brilliantly, ingeniously invented an entire way.
There are some states where I couldn't graduate from high school. And then I just got an article from a newspaper on making algebra available for third graders. There's some third graders that ought to be doing algebra. See, that's the thing. It's like one kind of kid, they should be doing algebra, and someone like me ought to just take business math. So I'd know how to run my business.
Right.
And see, this is where I'm not suggesting getting out of all math. Some people can't do algebra, take geometry. I never got a chance to try geometry because they kept pounding away on algebra. But when you think of something like veterinary medicine, we have a beautiful campus where you can watch some stray cats and dogs. And I like to look at the camera that looks straight down into it. I've watched a lot of those surgeries now. And as I watched it, I'm going, what does algebra have to do with spaying this tiny kitten? Very meticulous work. This has nothing to do with algebra. And veterinarians are required to take algebra, geometry, and calculus. Now, the prerequisites for vet school. I think we need to be thinking about now arithmetic. Yes, absolutely have to have that. But I ended up working in what's called industrial process equipment. That's the shop people. And they don't just fabricate equipment, they invent equipment. I spent 25 years working with them. They don't get credit.
Yeah, well, yes, that's so true. So these are the visual thinkers, the information that literally just comes in almost like a download that can see it. You were able to see your work with cattle and in the industry. You've been a professor at Colorado State for years.
And how did I get to be a PhD? Well, I majored in psychology. I dodged math classes everywhere I went. Majored in
Good
behavior. I had to get tutored through 2 statistics classes. I got a C as in Charlie in one of them. But it's a different way of problem solving. And an animal is a sensory-based thinker. They think in pictures, they think in smells, they think in touch sensations. It's a sensory-based world for an animal.
Do you find that people on the spectrum, it's actually quite the same? It's which is why there can be sensory overload, that it's a hypersensitivity to stimulus. Where so animals you can really relate to because they're also sensitive.
Well, they're sensitive, but there's a problem in the autistic nervous system with hypersensitivity to sound. Now, one of the things that you can do, if a child's afraid of the vacuum cleaner, is let the child control it. When they turn it on and off, they may get to tolerate it, and it may get to be their favorite plaything. Let them control it. I'm very concerned about kids wearing headphones all the time. Wear them all the time, sound sensitivity is going to get worse. But you can have them with you all the time, so you have control.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. And then how about the visual again with the screens? It occurred to me today that it's a nature break to step away from the little mini computers in our hands to go ahead and have more of a natural synapses, because there can be.
I'm going to just say that let's just
visual
50s, 1 hour a day. I'm not talking about Microsoft Word or something like that.
Right.
Or spreadsheet. I'm talking about endless video watching and video games. Let's limit it. Now, the people that tend to get addicted to the video games tend to be the visual thinkers like me. You know how to get them off, the young adults? Automobile mechanics. There's been 5 or 6 really good successes where they were gradually introduced to auto mechanics, and they found that car motors were more interesting than video games. And that led to jobs. The other thing that concerns me about video games is they're not going into the video game industry, and a lot of video game design is going to get replaced with artificial intelligence. Fixing cars is not going to get replaced by artificial intelligence.
Well, and you had mentioned there's certain industries that we still need that human touch. Maybe a hairdresser, a veterinarian, and the car mechanics, really.
Car mechanics, if a job's hands-on, it's AI proof.
Mm-hmm.
All the jobs for fixing things, those are all going to remain. Even if you have robots fixing stuff, you still have to repair those things. And these would be perfect jobs for people on the spectrum, for the visual thinking mind. And then your mathematics mind is going to do the programming. So let's say a kid's in a robotics club. My kind of mind builds the robot, and the mathematics kid programs it. You see, you need to have both.
You do need to have both. I'm still team human, and I know AI and robotics is very fascinating, but still, we all need that human touch. We literally do.
No, and it's, I want to see kids go out and get good jobs. The other thing that's a big problem I'm seeing with older autistics is not making the transition to work. At least in the US, where over the years I've observed we're doing a much better job with the young ones, the real little kids. But where we're not doing such a good job is a transfer to work. And those are different kinds of skills than school skills. And I see a lot of parents overprotect their kids, do everything for them. I'm seeing fully verbal teenagers, never gone shopping, never learned to have a bank account. They're not learning to drive. But let's just start with the shopping and ordering food in restaurants. They're not doing that. And this is ridiculous. I was shopping at 7 and 8 years old.
Right. These are those basic skills again. I mean, there are people everywhere that don't know how to go grocery shop, or they don't know how to cook an egg or make a peanut butter sandwich, those basic kind of life skills. So now you take some perhaps fear factors. That was something else that you kind of whispered in to some of these parents of the spectrum children raising are fearful. So they're afraid to go shopping, or they're afraid to do this or that. So speak to how is it that the parents can I think we need let them go, let them fly.
Yeah, you're going to have to let go some, and let's just start doing little baby steps. Like the next time you're pumping gas, have the kid run in the store and buy a loaf of bread or something, just do some shopping. You're right there. Let's start doing things like paper route substitutes. Like when I talked to the granddads that discovered they're autistic when they're an adult, they had paper routes at age 11. So what can we do to substitute for the paper routes that no longer exist? Well, how about walking the neighbor's dog? It's very important that they're doing a task on a schedule for a boss who's not family. That's important. Maybe a church volunteer job. Recently, just a few months ago, I talked to a 12-year-old who was so proud that she was the church coffee lady. This is something that costs nothing to set up. Or maybe you help out, with an elderly person, every day, help them out. And then as soon as they're legal, they need to be getting real jobs. And I want to avoid the chaotic multitasking at a takeout window. Another thing that will really help with jobs is any task that involves a sequence. Make a pilot's checklist. Okay, let's say to clean a ice cream machine. Take apart steps, cleaning steps, reassembly steps in checklist format. That will help with working memory issues. That's a very, very simple accommodation that really matters, really works.
Well, that's great. And so talk to us more about perhaps the undiagnosed adults, or the if there are lack of services, or what perhaps we might need to be educated in, what kind of services there could be for the adults.
Undiagnosed adults, for a lot of them, when they get a diagnosis, it's almost a relief because it explains problems with the relationships. Now I have a book called Different, Not Less, where 18 adults diagnosed later in life all have decent jobs, got diagnosed, and with relationships, that's where it helped. It was almost a relief because it explained why they had relationship issues. But the thing where we're really not doing a very good job on is making the transfer to work. And it's something we need to do slowly, because I'm seeing too many kids graduate from high school, maybe even graduate from college, no work experiences, and then they fail in the workplace. See, what I'd rather do is have a gradual transition from school to work, ideally get that done before they graduate from high school. Okay, let's say you start in college, they need to be doing some career relevant jobs during the summer and learning some working skills.
Right. And are there groups that you're finding that are putting those pieces together, or college campuses?
Yes.
that are recognizing this.
Yes, they are people putting it together. I really like a program in Denver called TACT, teaching autistic community trades. And in this group, they take young adults and they have kind of a exploration camp where they can try on cybersecurity, fixing cars, welding, carpentry work, a bunch of stuff, and see what they like. And then they have small classes that have both the mechanic teacher and a job coach. So at the same time they're learning their trade, they also are job coached. And then the interviews are avoided because they TACT has contracts with car dealers, with car companies, and then they're placed in a dealership with a job coach for another 2 months. And they have a 70 to 80% success rate.
That's wonderful.
Another good thing called Project Search. And this started out just with hospital jobs, and they've expanded. And they have an extensive, long internship where they're coached.
That's wonderful. So I loved always being able to offer resources to the listeners. Now, what would you say to those who are in the education field, especially if they're writing curriculum or they're editors at, they work with the teachers and things? Is there something that might be missing? And maybe that's also giving voice to the kiddos, to the people that have something to say, and maybe they should be writing some curriculum. What would you say to the behind the scenes of education?
There are certain kids that if they're a math kid, a pattern thinker, that third grader maybe needs to be taking algebra. Mm-hmm. And I'm not suggesting putting them in high school. Maybe we just put it on a laptop and they'll work on it in the third grade class. Or someone like me work on my art and building things. See, my kind of mind needs to be building things. And one of the reasons why I'm going to emphasize the trades is these jobs are AI proof, or artificial intelligence proof, where art and some other things, video game design, a lot of low-level programming, AI is going to replace that. So I'm going to tend to push the things that artificial intelligence is not going to replace. And one of those things is assembling airplanes. There's a lot of bolts that have to be done up right. It's a good job for somebody with autism.
I think so too. Now, when these days there's so much anxiety just out in the ethers, and part of your work, of course, with the animals has to do with calming them and having the squeeze boxes. And are you finding that there are other ways that could tactile thing for kids, for adults, that may be having the weighted blanket or other devices?
Those are simple things, weighted vests, weighted blankets. Now, I want to emphasize it doesn't work on everybody. This is where the sensory issues are different. So if a kid is a pressure seeker, tends to get under sofa cushions and things like that, that's the kid that a weighted vest may help. See, these sensory problems are extremely variable. It's not totally a one size fits all. And sometimes the vest works better if you wear it for a little while, 20 minutes or so, and then take it off for a few minutes. It tends to work better. But these are simple accommodations. The other thing is, fidgeting with your hands. I kind of do, here's a legal pad I kind of decorated right here.
Doodling, doodling is great. I was doing
that during a Zoom conference, and I had to do something that doesn't make a noise. Well, now I used to click pens. Okay, that drives everybody crazy doing that. So find something to do with your hands that doesn't make a noise like that. There's fidget spinners, there's little squeezy balls. Well, I have a cow in a suit here. Every industry, this is an oil field equipment squeezy thing. I got a cow here in a suit. I've got the truck that I learned on squeezy toy. Every industry has got its little squeezy toys. And that's something, that you could do with your hands that doesn't make a noise and bother people.
Right. Oh, that's a great idea. And now, one of the things that was brought up, I think, at the school, the nonverbal. And let's talk about nonverbal communication and perhaps some tools that you might have and suggestions for family members and educators, the neighbor down the street, if they see someone that it feels like they're in distress or they're letting out noise. Let's talk about
Well, on somebody who doesn't speak, you got to give them a way to communicate.
Right.
I can remember the frustration of not being able to express my needs. I thought to myself, I'm going to scream now because I don't have any other way of telling my mother I'd hate this hat and I don't want to wear it. Mm-hmm. And so you could use sign language. You can use various communication devices. And then there's some non-speaking individuals who can actually learn to type on a computer, but you've got to use a tablet. So the print appears next to the keyboard. No attention shift. Laptops don't work very well because you have to look up. You have to look up from the keyboard. When they press a button on the keyboard, they need to be able to see the button and see the letter appear at the same time.
So more like a pad or a tablet is much more helpful.
Like a pad or a tablet, or if you have a desktop, you could put the keyboard on a box. Mm-hmm. That's a bit cumbersome. Somebody did that years ago, and it worked. So giving them a way to communicate. The other thing is sometimes they get in a sensory overload situation. There's too much commotion going on. Sensory overload is a big problem. And another issue in somebody who doesn't speak is a hidden painful medical problem. And one of the most common ones is acid reflux and stomach problems. And their tummy is hurting them, their stomach's hurting them, and they can't tell you. You might try some acid reflux medicine. Could have an ear infection, a sinus infection, a urinary tract infection, constipation, hidden painful medical they don't tell you about. And then there are some behavioral reasons. Get out of doing something. That sometimes can happen. That's strictly behavioral. Get something they want. So you kind of have to be a detective. But a lot of these individuals have hidden painful medical problems they can't tell you about. And the doctors have a tendency to say, well, he's just autistic. Well, maybe he's got acid reflux. That's a medical problem that makes the stomach hurt.
Right.
I have it, and it's not nice.
No, it's not fun at all.
It's not fun at all.
It's totally not fun at all. And to be able to have someone who could really tap in, if it's a doctor or somebody that can say, well, wait a second, let's really look at what's happening here, and to recognize there's physical pain happening, or a behavior, or there's something else.
The first thing we got to do is give them a way to communicate.
Right.
That is big number one. Mm-hmm. Big number one. Really, really important. And then every once in a while, you might get a psychomotor epilepsy. And that's where something like just jumping up and hitting something comes completely out of the blue, where there's no noises, nothing. And then you have to treat that with a seizure drug. Mm-hmm. And it's very, very hard to diagnose it because they'll tear all the wires off their head.
Right.
But before you worry about that, let's worry about sensory overload and not having a way to communicate, and hidden painful medical that they cannot tell you about.
Right. So I think I'm going to go into what's your favorite part of your day and where to have fun, and even having fun raising these kids, that there's music and there are activities, and that music can be very calming. And we know you're saying science and music is very tied together. That maybe there are some certain frequencies that can have a calming effect.
Musical instruments need to be introduced.
Yes, right.
I was exposed to a little flute. I couldn't figure out how to play it. But another kid's going to take off with that. So I'm a big fan of exposing kids to all different kinds of stuff and see what they gravitate towards. Mm-hmm. Because how could a child show that he's super good at math if he wasn't exposed to that more advanced math book? Or how can you find out that the Lego builder could be good with tools if they're not exposed to tools? And I'm seeing too many very talented Lego builders that are not graduating to tools. And then I've also heard stuff, well, the autistic kid can't take shop because of insurance and liability. Well, in my generation, the special ed kids owned the shops, owned them. And they had 20 patents to go along with it of equipment that's still being used today.
That's right. That's right. That's the best part. And so that kind of going back to the music, or to play, just to play and be exposed and to have fun, which is all about experimenting. what is someone gravitate to? Is it dance? Is it movement? Is it visual? Is it color?
Well, there's some kids that are kinesthetic, and they like to dance and do stuff like that.
Right.
I'm a big proponent of getting exposed to lots of different things. And then when a kid shows an interest, then you need a teacher to mentor him. Let's take Michelangelo, grubby little 12-year-old, but he was running around the churches. They were commissioning all this great art. Then he started making things, and then he was apprenticed into a studio. That would be the mentoring, because you have to work on developing these things that they're good at. But unfortunately, sometimes it gets too locked into the label. And the other thing about doing things that interest you is you get friends who shared interests. The places where I was not bullied when I was in high school was riding horses and Mr. Carlock, my science teacher's model rocket club. Today it's going to be robotics club, or it might be school band. These are things that have been very successful for some autistic individuals.
Absolutely. So do you want to talk about your work with animals still and what you're doing out there in Colorado and some of the stuff that jazzes you? What brings you such joy every day? Because I know you're a busy woman who has passion.
Figuring out how to solve problems. And right now, at the age I'm at now, I'm way past retirement age, is I want to see these kids that are different get into a career they're going to really like. So they've got stuff they really like to do that's a career. One of the things that's made my life worthwhile is having an interesting career and solving problems with animals. And one of the things that helped me to relate to animals is they live in a sensory-based world. So the first thing I look at is, okay, what is the animal seeing? What is it smelling? What is it tending to? And somebody who thinks verbally doesn't tend to look at this. Betsy, my learner, she's my co-author on visual thinking. And I do real disorganized rough drafts, and she straightened them all out. But she has a dog, and I said, Betsy, get somewhere you can let your dog off the leash and watch what it does. And when she watched what it was smelling and exploring, as she watched it, then she got a much better idea of what the dog is all about, living in this sensory-based world. But she needed to actually see it.
And allow that. I love that you just said, let it off its leash. We can say that about all of us, really, in our kids. We need to allow them space to breathe and to observe keenly what they're doing in their own sensory world.
What I'm seeing is too many parents, when I suggest, like, maybe have the kid run in the shop buy something when they're right there, I've had them say they just can't let go. Mm-hmm. Talking about little baby steps. I had a 12-year-old come up to me at the airport who had never shopped, and we were sitting in the gate, and there was a shop right across the hall. I gave her a $5 bill. I said, go in that store and buy something. And we were right there. We could see it. And she went in and bought a drink and gave me back the change. First time she'd shopped by herself.
These are amazingly simple, but so very, very important.
It was
tasks.
Simple. And you're not sending her across town. We were sending her across the hallway. It was 50 feet away, and you could see the front of the store.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what is the fun part of your day? What is it that just lights you up?
Well, I really like reading science magazines. So I like to have a leisurely breakfast with the science and the nature, get into some deep reading. I like doing that. I read a lot of stuff on planes.
Well, because you're traveling, your schedule is prolific. And so that must jazz you. Your energy just must come from within, because you have this mission almost. You've been a pioneer. And are you seeing now, you're 76 years old. Many people think of retirement, but you're going. And you're going strong.
With myself.
Right. Exactly. So are we going to Mars? Do you work with folks and talk to folks with NASA and the space programs? Where do you see, again, with the jobs and the careers, we could be working off planet. You never know what these kids are going to be doing for us.
We've got to expose them to lots of different things. Mm-hmm. And I was very interested in the space program. I wanted to go into that, but I couldn't do the higher math. And so I got into animal behavior, But the other thing I got into was called industrial process equipment. It's basically the shop people that invent all kinds of equipment. Industrial process equipment, that's what I did. And there's no barrier of entry. There's no academic barrier of entry into this field. And they're basically the people that invent industrial equipment and repair it. And now they're building all these automatic warehouses. Somebody's going to have to fix all that stuff that's in there.
It's true.
Perfect job for a visual thinker on the spectrum.
Yep.
Elevators. I've been on elevators lately that have not been serviced. They are mechanical devices. I don't see in the foreseeable future them changing very much. Somebody's got to fix them.
Mm-hmm. It's true. So it's like your clarion call of bridging what is possible,
right.
and
then
knowing
you have the
that
mathematical kids.
Yeah.
I can see low-level programming being taken over by artificial intelligence. But right now, AI is doing fantastic things on pharmaceutical discovery, like discovering new drugs and discovering new compounds. It's just doing amazing things. But you have to have some very brilliant people to direct it. See,
right.
That's where chemistry is going. I just can't believe some of the stuff I'm reading that AI can do. But it needs to have direction.
Right.
And also, the AI is only as good as its training data set. And if you feed it rubbish, in fact, even back in the days of the old IBM 360, they had what they called GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. So you have to have a good training data set.
That's so true. We get to program what we want our AI to learn from us. So we can be very conscious about that. So I appreciate that you were just saying that. So
but we need. Let's look at this computer that we're using right now. There's a lot of autistic people that worked on this Zoom program, that worked on the computer systems. I've been out to those tech companies. Half those programmers are on the spectrum. So
mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the increase in autism is simply increased detection. I think that's what most of it is.
So it's been a higher awareness.
Higher awareness, yeah. Because you have the little kid that has no speech. Okay, those are diagnosed early, hopefully. But then you've got the kid who's 8 or 9 years old with no friends. That's another pattern I'm seeing where that kid's getting an autism label.
Right. So, Dr. Grandin, kind of winding up our beautiful conversation here, is there a lasting legacy? Is there something else that's perhaps you haven't been able to speak of quite yet that is just hot on your heart, you want to just let everybody know this is what's still very important?
I want to see these kids that are different get into a really satisfying career, because that's what's made my life really worthwhile. And I get very happy when a mom comes up to me and said, well, my kid went to college because of one of your books, or I did this and my kid's got a fantastic job at a computer company. That's the kind of stuff that I like hearing. I was at a meeting last night in Austin, Texas, and I had some parents say, well, I've watched you like 4 times over the last 30 years, and my kid's doing really well in his career, and you were really helped me, this is the mom talking, helped my kid to get into a good career. See, I feel that that's one of the most important things I can do now, because having meaningful work gives my life meaning. And I think right now I'm doing a lot of talks everywhere and doing a lot of Zoom calls too. And if that helps the kid get out there and be successful. But what I'm seeing is the parents get so locked into the label, they don't think their kid, and I'm talking maybe an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old, is capable of doing anything themselves. And I'm talking about just simple life skill stuff.
So you're saying don't be afraid of the label. Just peel that label right off and move forward.
Autism is an important part of who I am, because I'm never going to be totally social. My idea of fun reading for breakfast is Science and Nature. I go, oh boy, I just got my new Nature. I can sit down and have a 2-hour breakfast. Or my new Science magazine. Those are things that, I just find that just so interesting. I like to read that kind of stuff. I'd much rather read that than a romance novel. But what I've learned when I listen to all the country Western music is that 80% of it is about relationships, though I'd much rather hear the truckering song. That one I relate to better.
Of course. Of course. So, Dr. Grandin, I really, really appreciate our time here together. Thank you so, so much.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. And one other little tip. Autistic person at an interview needs to sell their work. Show off their drawings. Show off their drawings. Show off what they're capable of doing. Okay, here's one of my drawings right here. Show the drawings off. Show what you're capable of doing. Learn to sell your work.
Well, and not to be afraid to be out in the world saying, here I am. Here's what I'm capable of. I have one of your books right here that I just love.
That's the Calling All Minds.
Calling All Minds, about inventions and creativity and the fun things that people have invented. And, that every one of us has that ability. And folks on the spectrum, there is no limit to what's available.
Get them out doing things. Because the other thing I tell business people, the first thing you have to do is realize that different minds think differently. And we need these skills. We need the skills of people on the spectrum. This technology that we're talking on right now would not exist without some autistic brains working on it.
Absolutely. So speaking of showing off your work, do you want people to find a website, or is there a new project or book that you would like to talk about?
Well, the other thing is seeing doors to opportunity. In the HBO movie, Temple Grandin, which also shows exactly how visual thinking works, that's very accurate how that's shown, is seeing doors to opportunity. There's a scene in there where I go up to the editor of the Arizona Farmer Ranchman magazine and I get his card. Because I knew if I wrote for our state farm magazine, that would help my career. I saw that door to opportunity. And those kind of doors to opportunity are everywhere. And people are just not seeing them. You never know where you're going to find the person that could open the door. And then you have to have the guts to get the card and then produce a decent article for them. And that led into me becoming livestock editor for that magazine. That really helped my career a whole lot.
That's great. I love what you just said. Just find a door, and maybe you don't even know the door is there, but there's a window of opportunity, and take it, grab it, and see what happens.
You see, he just happened to be at this cattle event.
Right.
I don't even know why he was there. It wasn't the kind of cattle event that was even important, but he was there, and I grabbed on the opportunity.
Right.
You see, and a lot of people, they're too scared to go up and get the card. I did, and I think this goes back to social skills training I had as a child. In my neighborhood, all the 7 and 8-year-olds, when the parents had a party, had to put on their good clothes and be little hosts and hostesses, greet the guests, serve the snacks, take their coats. Also, I sold candy for charity. You had to go knock on the doors and talk to people. I think that helped me have the guts to go up and get the card. And again, these are simple things to do that even the lowest income families can do those two things. Everybody has parties. Put the kids to work.
Right. No, absolutely. And know that that's okay and vital and important to do so.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I guess I'll go ahead and ask, did you grow up in Massachusetts, or that you were born there and then moved out to the country west, to the western area?
I grew up in Massachusetts, and I didn't get exposed to livestock until I was a teenager.
Okay.
And so these kids that came from a non-ag background. But I've also seen individuals go into a skilled trade they were autistic, came out of a low-income background, they took shop class in school, and were very successful in their careers.
Yeah. It's good stuff. Well, as a fellow New Englander, because I grew up in Massachusetts as well, I like the kindred spirit, and also Arizona. That's where my family would go to really get good old desert country and ride horses and have that fun. And come out of the East Coast. So these are some great opportunities. And I think that's really the nugget of what your work is about, what my show Lasting Conversations is about, is offering resources, opportunity, knowing that we all have each other's backs, if we don't know something, here are some people who do. And this show, this interview that you were very gracious with your time, has offered so much to so many people that they can take this information and help who they're meant to help.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thanks again. Take care, everybody.
I will. I'm going to sign off, and thank you for having me.